Hey everybody, it's me, Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie, and you are watching another episode of PUNK SHUI. This is a show where I try to talk about bands that bring the aggressive sound of punk and mix it with great melodic hooks. It's not pop punk, it's not punk pop, it's PUNK SHUI. And this episode, I'm going to talk about Generation X. A lot of people know this band because of their lead singer. Who is their lead singer? Billy Idol. And of course, this is obviously before Billy Idol went solo. But the band also featured some other great musicians. Durwood Andrews, he went on to be part of the group Westworld, who had some hits in the UK, and I really like them. And then also Tony James. And Tony James was in a band called London SS with Mick Jones, who went off to form The Clash. I'm wondering, was Billy Idol or Durwood in London SS? London SS, by the way, is not the same as the group London, who I've covered on PUNK SHUI. Then Tony James and Billy Idol got together and they formed Generation X. They wrote all the songs together. They had a very, very short career, and I'll go through their albums here real fast and then play you some music in just a few minutes. But Tony James also was the brains behind Sig Sig Sputnik. And then, of course, and they were huge in the UK for a little while. Tony James, just a great marketing genius. And sometimes I seem to think, gosh, was Generation X a real punk band, or were they just marketed as a real punk band? I think more the former than the latter, or maybe 75-25%. But anyway, Tony James then ended up in Carbon Silicone with Mick Jones, who was in The Clash and Big Audio Dynamite. Confusing, I know. So let's just go back to Generation X. They formed in 1976. It was, as I said, Billy Idol, Tony James, Durwood Andrews, and drummer Mark Laff. They came together, they signed with Chrysalis Records, and they released their first album, and that was just called Generation X. That album came out in 1978, produced by Martin Rushent, who also produced The Stranglers and Yachts and Human League and things like that. Great producer, and it's a great album. The big song off the album, of course, is Ready, Steady, Go, and that's kind of like their calling card from these early days, from their original lineup. The album is chock full of great melodic hooks, and I just don't think that they did as well as they should have. In terms of, they put out a great record and it should have done better, is what I'm saying. This was a band that was constantly changing and moving. And by the time they put out their next album in 1979 called Valley of the Dolls, they had moved up in producer. Well, not up. They moved to a bigger name at the time, Ian Hunter, who was part of Mott the Hoople. Now, I believe that Martin Rushent got punk. He got that energy. He was able to produce it more. Ian Hunter did a great job, but it was a little bit muddy and it wasn't as powerful as the debut album. Valley of the Dolls is a really, really good album, just not as great as the debut. I like it better now, I think, than I did back then. But that's just because maybe I get it now. I understand where they were coming from. You had this young, energetic band meeting, basically a rock and roll legend, and him producing them and him taking them in a direction that they weren't going before. But they wanted to break those chains, those punk rock chains. They wanted to be taken more seriously and to be seen as, this mature band. And all punk bands wanted to break barriers, and it's just that punks didn't want punks to break barriers, even though punk was about breaking barriers. I don't know, go figure. Anyway, by the end of the year, the band had gone back into the studio, because Valley of the Dolls hadn't done that well. So at the end of 79, the band goes back into the studio and they start laying down demos for what was going to be their third album. And then, now I don't know if it was about this time that Billy got Bill Aucoin as the band's manager. But of course, Bill Aucoin and Kiss, and you know what that means. That means that there might be a little commercial push. So by the end of 79, the original Generation X had split. Now, the albums that I've been talking about, here is the first album. That's just called Generation X, and that's Valley of the Dolls and this is on a CD. This does have some bonus tracks on it. There is a more expanded version of the first album that I eventually have to get, and that's a 2 CD version, so it's got everything that's on here and a lot more, including like unreleased versions of songs produced by Phil Wainman, which I think is exciting. I can't wait to hear those. But for some reason, I don't have that. Anyway, so Bill Aucoin sort of takes over Generation X split. Derwood Andrews, Mark Laff, they go off. But Billy Idol and Tony James stuck around. And they decided, well, let's continue and we'll bring in some new members. And they brought in Terry Chimes, who used to play drums with The Clash. And as a guitarist, for their new sessions under the name Gen X, they had changed the name to Gen X. They were going in a more commercial direction. So they brought in different guitarists. One of them was James Stevenson, who plays with so many great bands. He's an incredible guitar player. He's been in the business for however many years, 4 decades, more than that maybe. And he's played on a lot of great records. And every time you see James Stevenson's name as a band member or something like that, that's a band to pay attention to because it's going to be quality. Also, they had the legendary John McGeoch play on it, and they had Steve Jones play on the album as well. Now, that album that came out, let me show you here, it's called Kiss Me Deadly. And this album contains a song, a little nugget, called Dancing with Myself. And here in Southern California, that became massive. The Gen X single, Dancing with Myself, was huge. It was just crazy. This is what everybody in America knows them for. A lot of people who dig that song never heard Ready, Steady, Go or the first album or the second album by Generation X. They just know this album by Gen X. It's the first Gen X album, but it's actually the third Generation X album. I'm sure that makes sense to you now, right? And, of course, then Billy Idol, Bill Aucoin is pushing, hey, you should move to New York. And Tony James didn't want to move to New York. None of the guys in the band wanted to. So, of course, Billy Idol moves to New York, and he goes solo, and Gen X is over and done with. And I think there's been a couple reunions and stuff in the meantime. But there is this Billy Idol. I'm not going to get into his solo career, but the reason I'm bringing this up is because this contains Dancing with Myself. It might be a remix from that. I should go back and check it, but I haven't. They sound very similar. But this has that Dancing with Myself. They added that to the Don't Stop EP. And also there's a song here, track 3, called Untouchables, which is a re-recording of a song from the Gen X album, Kiss Me Deadly. So that's that. And then Generation X was over. I believe that Billy Idol and Tony James have remained friends. And there was actually a short-lived band just a few years ago called Generation Sex, which was Tony James, Billy Idol from Generation X, and Steve Jones and Paul Cook from the Sex Pistols. So they would do Generation X and Sex Pistols songs. But I do want to mention, before I play you a little bit of music, Generation X have had many compilations. And the one that I would recommend the most is Anthology. And the reason I would recommend this is Disc 1 is pretty much like all the key tracks from their career from the 3 albums. So the 2 Generation X and the Gen X album. Disc 3 is live. You know me and live. I don't care. But Disc 2, remember how I said that they had gone into the studio to record their 3rd album, but then the band broke up? Well, those songs, which were essentially just basically demos, they weren't prepared really to lay the album down. They just had them, they were just demoing them. That is all here. And some of the songs made it to the sessions for the Gen X album, Kiss Me Deadly. So they re-recorded some of these songs, including the original version of Dancing with Myself, which is on there. But this is really, really fun. It's a great collection by Generation X. And we all know Billy Idol. He's gone on and made a Christmas album. Huh? But he did put out the self-titled album, Rebel Yell. Both of those I love, that Christmas album. Anyway, I have put together a medley featuring snippets of a few songs from each of the Generation X albums, and Gen X, of course, just so either you could relive this great music, or you can hear it for the first time, because you might be a Billy Idol fan and never went back to listen to Generation X. I moved from Generation X to Billy Idol. Some people discovered Billy Idol solo and then went back. But either way, why don't you sit back, relax, give this medley a listen, and I will see you on the other side.
Ready, steady, go. Ready, steady, go. Ready, steady, go. Ready, steady, go. I'm not in love with television. I'm not in love with the radio. Shake out any wall. 100 punks. Ooh, 100 punks rule. Don't wanna spend my life saving up for things. I don't wanna have what a steady job brings. I don't want security. Why would you? Why would you? Why would you? King Rocket, a King Rocket, rock, rock, rock. King Kong, King Kong, King Rocket, a King Rocket, rock, rock, rock. King Kong, King Kong, standing out the beat, 'cause I felt the heat. Man, they sure look neat. Oh, tonight, for sure, you'd be the same as me. We didn't have to fight on the other side of town. Running with the boss out. We're running with the boss out. We're running with the boss out. Sick to death of hearing things from you, running psychotic, short-sighted politicians. All I want is the truth. Just give me some truth. I'm sick to death of reading things by stupid little punk rockers. All I want is the truth. Just give me some truth. I'm a short-sighted yellow belly son of drinking dick. He's gonna mother her and stop so big. Just a pocket full of hope. When there's nothing to lose and there's nothing to prove, I'm dancing with myself.
Anyway, that's it. I hope this inspires you to check out the music of Generation X. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, ring that bell for future notifications. And until the next time, remember me. I'm Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie.